Well, good morning. Good to have you joining us this morning on our Friday morning edition of our devotional. Glad to have you with us. We've been looking through these days at devotionals, following up on our series, When God Doesn't, and looking at Habakkuk's prayer and wondering why God doesn't execute his justice. And we've seen the back and forths between them and really just conclude that God does what he says he will do. He will do it sometimes in ways that we don't expect, and that we are to trust him nonetheless, and that is what Habakkuk chooses to do. So for today, I want to share with you a verse from the New Testament. I believe just a good thought for us as we move into Friday and into our weekend. It's from Philippians, Paul's letter to the church at Philippi. Certainly, Paul was going through a time in his imprisonment of wondering why he was imprisoned, and yet he's come to that conclusion to wait quietly for God and to let God carry out His will, and to really work with the people whom Paul had ministered to, though he's not with them now, and that God was doing it just in a different way than might normally be expected. And really, at the very beginning of the letter, I think are some powerful words for us as modern day churches, wondering, where is God in our circumstances, in our hurt, in our season of life. And I want to share this with you because I think it speaks loudly to us. He says to the Philippians, after encouraging them, he says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. The apostle encourages these young believers not to live selfish lives. And I think so many churches, so many Christians in the 21st century, we're suffering the consequences of not following through with that, of not being selfless. We might think that we're selfless, but many cases we like things a certain way. We object when things are not in our life the way that we like them. And the idea of sacrificing is good in theory, but sometimes in our normal lives it doesn't play out. And so for Paul to be very blunt and to say, don't be selfish, is a strong call to all of us. He says, don't try to impress others, but instead be humble. Don't try to put yourself as the reason for things. He says, think of others as better than yourselves. That Greek word is the idea of someone towering over you. In other words, someone who's very important. Imagine what it would be in churches if when a stranger walked in, they were always viewed as the most important person, the VIP of the town. Certainly, if a famous person actually came to visit in a church, they wouldn't walk in untalked and sit all alone in an empty pew. But that does happen a lot. And but famous comes, then that doesn't happen to them. People want to walk up to them. They want to introduce themselves, tell them what their name is, tell them how glad they are that they're there. And Paul is saying that's how we should view everybody. On the street, in Walmart, we should see other people as VIPs. And it's a change. It's not part of that fleshly nature to do so. We're naturally defensive people. But Paul says to be humble. And he goes on in that vein to say, don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too. In other words, the things you're interested in, add people to that list. Be interested in the lives of others. And that's going to be others that you're not already a part of or not already a part of your life. Again, in that church setting, that 20-year-old, 20-something would leave the area and the circle of friends that they always sit with, and would go down and sit next to, say, an 80-year-old, someone that they don't have anything in common with, someone who maybe they just know them by name only, but they sit down next to them in a pew, and they strike up a conversation with them, and more than just the how you doings, but take an interest in what's going on and following up with that. Imagine the 80-year-old in that same place that they've always sat, but chooses to go and to sit next to that 20-something and engage with them, to take an interest in what's going on in their life, and to ask those probing questions to get to know one another. Paul says, take an interest in other people. And he gives us that example. He says, you must have the same attitude that Jesus Christ had. And what was that attitude? Well, though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. In other words, if there was ever a very important person, of course it was Christ. And yet Christ did not hang on to that to be aloof or to be, oh, he was somebody. He didn't cling to that. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave, of a servant, and he was born. And when he appeared in human form, he humbled himself like every other human in obedience to God. He took on that role, and he died a criminal's death on a cross, which is what death on a cross is. It's a execution for a criminal. And he chose that. He humbled himself completely. And so it's not asking too much for us to humble ourselves and take an interest in other people, and to get outside of our comfort zones, and to ask the second question, to try to find one's life. It may be strange to someone for you to suddenly take an interest in them, but that's what we're called to do. And I think that's a great day, and over this next spring break, is to get to know those that don't already have our same interest, but to take an interest in them, and to expand our worldview. This Sunday, I'm going to be speaking on parenting, and that's one of the areas that we'll be looking at is play as adults in parenting or being to children, and what role do children need to play in interacting with adults around them. So I hope that you'll be able to join in. That's at 10:30 this Sunday morning, online or in person at our church. We'd love to have you for that. Next week is spring break, people. Some of you work, and it won't be a different week, but it will be spring break for us at Crossroads. So we're going to take a week off on doing our morning videos and doing our devotionals, and we will pick back up the week after that for sure. But we have some different scheduling this next week, so we'll take that and look forward to following up what will be a new set of devotions beginning a week from next. So hope to see you this